Hey, these days, I barely touch the code base at all. In fact, most of our programming is done by the AI agents themselves, and they're pretty great. Not only are they responsible for the development side of things, I have them fully capable of deploying to production as well. Now, I live day to day with lots of AI in my workflows, but I tend to forget that not everybody is up to date with AI technologies. So I wanted to create a video for you guys where I talk about and show you my development workflow so that you might be able to get some insights to help speed up your own workflows. Now, my setup is not terribly complicated. I would say it's a natural progression of having used AI day in and day out, but it is full of little tips and tricks to help make my life easier, and so hopefully it'll do the same for you. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So first things first, I use Claude Code as my daily driver. If you're not familiar with Claude Code, it's basically an agentic coding tool that has the ability to read your code base, edit files, run commands, and more. And that makes it very useful. The way that I set up Claude Code is that I use a shell alias to help me set it up quickly. And not only that, I use it to turn on bypass mode. Now, bypass mode is really important because Claude Code tends to ask for a lot of permissions, and most of them are just fine to run. So the bypass mode allows me to auto-enable all of those permissions. Now, I understand this is inherently risky, but this is a risk I'm willing to take because the benefits are quite great. Now, when it comes to actually coding with Claude Code, I tend to keep things pretty simple, or at least as much as possible. In terms of skills, and if you're not familiar with skills, they're basically custom set of instructions that you can provide your agent. I don't use too many custom ones. I do use a few that the Anthropic organization provides for you out of the box, but outside of that, I don't use these too often. And that's because the default Claude Code is pretty smart enough to be able to figure out when to start planning things with you and when to start implementing. And it comes with some sub-agents that are already quite useful, like the implementation engineer that is able to delegate some of the work that Claude Code does. And the reason why I like to keep things simple is because I've come to realize that iteration with these tools is much better than having a fully flushed out specs at the very start of the project. And oftentimes I don't even know what kind of things I'm going to need until I start seeing things on the web and I have feedback for it. Now, when it comes to the model choices, I tend to stick with Opus 4.6. And the reason for that is because it's the smartest model that Anthropic currently has. And it's also the one that tends to get things right the first time. Now, obviously, the downside of using Opus is that it tends to burn tokens very quickly. And if you're on the Pro plan, you'll realize that you'll burn through your limits really quickly. So what I've done is I've upgraded my plan to the Max plan, which is more expensive. But, for us developers, time is money. And Opus tends to save me a lot of time. Now, in addition to Claude Code, I tend to use Codex as my secondary driver. Now, Codex I primarily use as a second opinion to Claude Code, or sometimes when I'm running low on my usage for Claude Code, I just switch to the OpenAI Codex. Now, the downside of this approach of having two different models is that I get two different configuration files for both of my Claude Code and Codex. So sometimes when I give an instruction to Claude to remember certain things, it goes into the Claude.md file for my global configuration file, but that doesn't get persisted to my Codex configuration file. So the solution that I've come to this is to create a single source of truth, and that lives in my agents directory. Now, inside of the agents directory, I have a single file here called agents.md. And this is a single source of truth that once it's been edited, I have a script that synchronizes this to both the Claude Code and the Codex directories. In addition, you'll see that in my agents directory, I have a Claude directory and a Codex directory. Now, these are the respective configuration files for Claude and Codex, and I have specific instructions for both agents basically in the agents.md to update this directory whenever something changes so that they get reflected back in a sync format to their respective directories. And the final thing that I have in my sync script is a git command to basically push this to a private GitHub repository, both as backup, but also for other kind of programs to pull from as well. So yeah, now that we have the AI agentic coding stuff set up, there was a new problem that came up for me, and that was the bottleneck of typing. Now, in the old days when we used to code by hand, obviously archaic and caveman-like, it was very hard to use audio transcription services because it's very hard to kind of denote stuff like curly braces or parentheses and spacing and all that kind of stuff. But now that coding has become more of just typing out natural language or English paragraphs, it's a lot easier to reach for audio transcription services now. So what I've done is I've created an application for Mac where I can use the OpenAI's Whisper model, which is a machine learning model for audio transcription. It's way more accurate than the built-in Apple dictation service. I use that to basically do all of my typing for me. And I have a keyboard shortcut which allows me to invoke it without having to use my mouse at all. So that makes it a lot easier. So let me show you what that looks like. Hey, can we show some stats about the amount of storage that the user is using on their dashboard? And after that, I just press it in and Claude Code does the rest for me. And this is a real problem that I have on my platform. So it's going to be a very good representation of how I would be coding. And you can see here now that it's entered plan mode. And so plan mode, obviously, if you guys are familiar with Claude Code at all, it's very good for kind of coming up with strategies before it starts implementing. But now Claude Code has become so smart, it just enters plan mode by itself, which is really handy. All right, so Claude has finished planning its implementation details. And this is a really nice feature for it to provide. Basically, as context fills up, the quality of our LLM diminishes. So Claude Code has built-in guardrails against that. So before it starts an implementation, it clears its context for you. So this is a really nice feature to use, and I almost always use it. So yeah, let's type enter here. All right, so Claude Code has finished programming and it gives me a little snippet as to what it changed, but I can basically review it on my app. And if I go here, you can see on the dashboard that it added a nice little storage icon that says 275 megabytes out of 100 gigabytes used. This is pretty much exactly what I wanted. Because I do like it, I am going to basically ask it to commit and push. And just to kind of explain what is happening behind the scenes here, none of this is new. And I do like to ask the AI to create a commit message for me because it creates a summary of the changes that it's made. And once it pushes it to the cloud or to GitHub, it triggers the GitHub action flow so that it pushes the changes to production on Vercel and Railway as well. So all of that stuff was set up by Claude Code. I didn't go in and manually wire things myself. All I did was I gave Claude Code access to the GitHub CLI, the Vercel CLI, and also the Railway CLI. Now, if you're interested in setting this up for yourself, I would say there isn't really a hard set way of doing it. The way that I set it up was relatively simple. I said, hey, Claude, I want to give you production access. I am going to be deploying things through GitHub Actions, and I want to use Vercel, and I want to use Railway, and basically asked it to, hey, set up a skill or learn to how to use these things. And Claude Code has a built-in skill builder, and Codex has one too. It will basically invoke those features and create a skill for itself. So it's kind of self-learning in that way. And so it's not very hard to add new skills and new abilities to your Claude Code. And these things, all in all, makes it very, very powerful. In fact, if there's a problem on production, it will use Vercel logs through the CLI to see what's happening inside of our deployment and come up with the fix itself. Very useful features to have all around. So another workflow I did want to mention was project management. So for simple projects where I'm basically working on it one by one ticket or one problem at a time, I don't really use any elaborate project management system. But if I'm working on a project where I know that there are a lot of tickets for that, I will basically create a ton of tickets and push them off to Notion. And the way that I do that is I've created a Notion skill inside of Claude Code, which again, it goes to Codex as well. And because Notion has an API, but not exactly a CLI support, I've gone ahead and I've asked Claude Code to create for me a CLI binding around the API. And if you're interested, you can use the project yourself to integrate with Notion. But this is interesting to me because we're essentially using AI to build infrastructure and the tooling for more AI uses. It's kind of like building the railway tracks as you're on the train itself. Have you guys ever played that video game called Unrailed? If you do, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, going back to the over Notion CLI, another thing that I did in my case was tell the AI to create bindings or options on the CLI to make it optimized for AI. So that means try not to use JSON because that tends to be quite verbose, but to use more terse language to convey information so that we're not needlessly filling up the context space in our models. Now, the way that I use Notion for my project is I essentially go to a project and I ask for, are there any pending tickets? Or what are the next tickets that we can work on? And if it does have tickets in the Notion board, it will pick those up and start working on it. If it doesn't, I will start a new brainstorming session or if I have specific tickets I have in mind, I will ask Claude Code or Codex to basically create those tickets for me on Notion, and it goes ahead and does that. Now, I get a lot of questions as to why I use Notion for project management. There's obviously a lot of different options. There's even one built into GitHub itself, or you could use stuff like Linear or Jira. But the primary reason for this is I've used Notion for many years now. I like the product, and it's something that I can use while I'm on the go. There's a mobile platform, so if I have an inspiration or an idea, I can basically jot it down, and my Claude Code or Codex instance is able to read from that, which is really handy for me. Well, that's a wrap up on today's video on my development workflow. Hope you found it interesting. And these days, I'm working on a new project where I'm trying to develop an autonomous team of AI agents where I can basically give them an idea and they can see it to fruition. I'm using a software called OpenAI, which I'm pretty sure most of you guys have heard about at this point, but if you haven't, I have a video on it that I released a few weeks ago. The video is called ClaudeBot, but it's exactly the same thing as OpenAI. They have just rebranded the name of the software. Concepts are exactly the same. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to stay notified of new future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.